Hello and welcome to another episode of the Midierror Meets podcast, the monthly music podcast where we talk to a wide range of people from the music world. This month we're speaking to DJ Rap, who is a phenomenally talented producer, DJ, singer, songwriter, who's travelled the globe with her musical career as well as running 2 record labels. Now, there's a GoFundMe page for this podcast, so if you want to support the podcast, check out the link in the description. But let's get on with the interview. So the first question I asked DJ Rap was about her musical beginnings.
I think my earliest memories of music were probably 5 years old, 6 years old on the piano. My mother taught me the initial piano setup, basics, chopsticks, all of that stuff. And that was where it was. And then I developed a real interest in it. And after that, continued to be classically trained. So I still play piano all the time. I do piano concerts every month for my fans. So yeah, that's my earliest memory of not picking up an instrument, but getting on an instrument, learning how to play it. And then eventually, by the time I was age 10, I'd already done grade 6 with distinction. I was already on that level. So I was quite into it, to be honest with you. And then I sort of discovered boys, and I'm kidding. I discovered wires and studios, and I got into more of that aspect of stuff. I thought for a long time I was going to be a concert pianist, so it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, I think it's a really good foundation. Anyone who does do those early classical things, the roots of music are all there, and there's a lot of heritage within that stuff. Were there any particular composers or song or?
Well, the way we were taught was the Suzuki Method. So that method is less about the theory and more about your instinct, really, in your ear. And I just gravitated towards anything. What my piano teacher would say is, you just love those black keys. So Beethoven was a staple. Anything just dark and moody, and basically, I just like the moody stuff. So yeah, I definitely was obsessed with Beethoven for many, many years, and trying to play anything that he's composed is just, it's still a wonderful challenge. So composers like that, really.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And when were you able to first translate that to synthesizers and sort of different sort of instruments with a keyboard?
Well, I think right away, the moment I think when you have that in you, you've got music in you, you've just got it in you, right? So for me, it was the moment I bought my first keyboard, which was, I think, an Ensoniq keyboard, and I think it had 4 seconds of sampling time. I can't quite, but it was my. And I remember that, you would basically get 4 seconds or whatever, and then you'd have a, what are those called? Gosh, I can't remember now. Little recorders that had 4 sort of slots, and so I'd have a little beat, and I'd have my Ensoniq keyboard, but I'd always start with chords or a melody or an arpeggiating sort of, melody that would start. And yeah, so for me, I still lead with melody. A lot of people, when they're making drum and bass, predominantly will start with 8 bars of beats and bass, and then build the tune backwards from there. But for me, it always starts with a melodic idea, and then the rest comes. That's how it works for me.
It's a fun. Yeah, I think it's a good foundation, because you can go from that place to somewhere else, and you can develop that idea, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's harder actually, though, to do it that way, because often if you've got something that's super melodic, it can be really hard to suddenly then go in a different direction and come with that really hard bass. Often it's actually better and easier to start with the bass and the beats and then work your way backwards. But when you've got so many melodic ideas in your head, for me, that just doesn't work, and I just make it work. So it's fine. I mean, as long as everything's in F, you just make those sub-friendly keys and you're fine. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess you can make a really beautifully articulate melodic thing, and you might get stunted thinking, well, how's a Reese bass going to fit under this twinkly bit.
But for me, the melody gives me those bass lines. Like when you start to play something in your head already, that's why they say music is instinctual. You do one step and then another step just comes, and another step. Your body and your mind and your soul sort of know what to do next. You're in that present state of just creation and playfulness. So for me, it's when I'm creating the melody, I can hear the bass in my head. And the real trick is managing to get what's out of your head onto your door, into your door. That's really the trick, isn't it? Like being able to not be owned by your door, but be the door is doing what you're telling it to do, rather than you're just playing around until something sounds good. It's like, no, this is what's in my head. I need to be able to translate that correctly. So yeah.
And do you have ways of translating that quickly? Because I know from experience that I've had a great tune in my head walking around in town, and I've got back home and distracted myself trying to do something different. So do you have a creative flow where that you enable that?
I think I try to be a bit disciplined in the sense that I don't do any sound design initially. And I know it's a bit of a thing, because with drum and bass, it's sort of, that is part of it. You have to sort of produce the sound design as you're going along. But when I'm initially writing, I tell myself I'm just in the writing phase. So if I'm just writing, I'm not worried about mixing, mastering. I'm not worried about the sound design. I'm not worried about, is this the right snare? I'm not trying to EQ anything. I'm not trying to put compression on anything. I'm not doing any of that. I'm literally just writing. And then what I do is I leave it looping. And if I get sick of it, that loop, then I know I'm not onto something good. In fact, I remember an old friend of mine, Ronnie Size, telling me maybe 30 years ago, we were having a discussion about production, and he was just saying to me, like, look, get something looping for 8 bars, go brush your teeth, do whatever you're doing, and if you still like it and it's still looping, and you're onto something good. And I think that was sound advice. Like, you have to be able to not be sick of it. And also then I like to write and then I stop, and that's the real trick for me. Is I take, sometimes writing the track, if you said how long does it take you to write a track, I'd tell you 1 to 2 days. But actually, it takes me a month, because what happens is I'll do the writing and then I'll just stop and I'll walk away from it, unless I'm absolutely on fire with it and I can't bear to leave it alone. Like, I had a track the other day that happened with, where it was just done in a day, and I knew it was great. And I was like, okay, that's it. I love this. That's it. But sometimes it's like the last track I had out, Roller Coaster, took 4 months before I was finally happy with it. And there was a lot of working on it for 5 hours, going away, coming back like 2 weeks later, continuing with that. In between, I'm working on different tracks, right? But then what happens to me is I get that initial, oh, this is what's wrong with it. Oh, this is what's right with it. Or, wow, this is actually really good. Or, oh my goodness, no, this is, that's not right. I've got to change that. So it becomes very obvious to me, after some perspective and time away from the track, what needs to be fixed. Now, other people, they're just blessed with being able to see that right away. For me, it takes a little bit of perspective and distance. So initially I go in the studio, my process is to write, just pick any sub bass, pick any bass, don't worry about the sound design, and just get the melody of it out. So write the melody of the song, and then it's sort of chipping away. So imagine a giant piece of clay that has no shape, but in your mind, the shape is in the clay. And then you're just quietly chipping away until you get what you want. So for me, it's definitely a process of writing and not exhausting myself, not putting that pressure on myself, because you could become musically impotent. And that's happened to me before as well, where, I'm just suddenly getting anxious when I'm making music. And then you're putting this pressure on yourself. It must be good, especially when you've had a big hit record. The last record you had was Monster. Then the pressure is really on. The first few hit records are easy to make. It's what happens after that is actually really frustrating. And I went through a real period of time where, I found that I just couldn't write anything. And so I stepped away from drum and bass for 10 years and produced everything else that was different from it, because I just couldn't wrap my head around what was going on. And then, you come back and suddenly, boom, you're on a productive stride again. It's weird.
There's a lot to compact. There's a lot to extract from what you just said then. There's a lot of really interesting things. Well, first of all, like the distance that you said about working on a piece and getting inspired and then giving it some space. I think that's really, really good advice for people. You know, a lot of people put themselves through the mill, just working on it and working on it, working on it. And sometimes, like with a relationship, you know, like too much contact with anybody, and you're going to maybe get under each other's skin a little bit. But I really admire that approach that you're talking about taking, where you come away from it. I think that's really useful.
I think when I was younger, I didn't take that advice. And what happened, you know, I was in the studio 24/7 all the time. And I was just basically very unhealthy. I was exhausted. I couldn't sleep because the music was looping in my head. I had no balance. I wasn't eating properly. You know, it was all I cared about was being in the studio. Now, you know, I go in the studio maybe 3 times a month. That's it. And, you know, I have a life, but for those 3 times that I go in that studio, I'm incredibly productive, and it just works. Because one, I'm excited because I'm gagging to get in there. 2, yeah. 2, it's my reward for getting all my other work done. I'm like, okay, now I can do something for me. But 2, I'm not exhausted. I approach it from a place of playfulness and curiosity, and there's no pressure. So when there's no pressure, you're in a playful, creative state. It's literally, oh, let's just have some fun. Let's just play with Serum today and see what happens. Let's just do this. Let's try, because a lot of drum and bass is trial and error and twisting sounds and using plugins that were not intended to be used that way. You know, and just experimenting. A lot of it for me is I will have, you know, sessions where I say to myself, right, you're not going to make anything today. Let's just play with basses. You know, I'm just going to spend an evening, you and me, Serum, it's a date. And I'm just going to see how much I can absolutely fuck you up tonight.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's about breaking the models, and that's the thing. It's like, you know, when you think about synthesis and what's involved and how we get these frequencies and what we do, which is why I find drum and bass so interesting, because it's all about breaking the modules and breaking those synths. I mean, the sampler was certainly not intended to be used for time stretching and all the things that we, you know, did to it back in the day. And, you know, things like, I mean, Goldie, you know, when he came out with those records, and Terminator and records like that, and use the sampler in such a unique way. And I remember using the Kurzweil and doing just mad things with it, and just getting these. I remember getting a Morley guitar pedal and sampling that and getting this mad metallic sound, which became a theme for the whole of Learning Curve when I produced that album. You know, with my co-producers, it was just about like, what can we use? You know, you could take anything. You could basically, when I teach my students how to make music in Ableton, one of the fun lessons that we have is, today we're going to make a track with our mouths. No plugins, nothing, just our mouths, and record. And, you know, we make a whole track out of all the sounds that could come out of your mouth, and then shape them and create them and split the frequencies. So you've got, you know, basically make a bass sound and then split the frequencies. So you've got like the sub, the mid, and the top, and do all this stuff. And people were just shocked at how much you can do with so little plugins. And I'm an advocate of making the best music you can with the least complicated path, because what happens is I end up rescuing a lot of students who they're exhausted mentally because they're overwhelmed by how difficult everything is. And that's not the goal of music. The goal of music is to give you joy. And so if you're swamped by plugins and the technology, it doesn't make sense. And you know, I'm an Ableton person. I use Ableton, but I used Logic before that, Notator before that, and Cubase before that. So, you know, to me, I have a couple of plugins that are my go-to plugins. When I say couple, a bit more than a couple, but obviously synths like Serum are my go-tos, but really everything pretty much head to tail in Ableton. You know, yeah, there are better EQs, there are better, you know, obviously there are better filters, and there are better this, but really, you know, the thing that I try to remind my students, it's not about how clever you are with your plugins, it's about the idea you have and the vibe you have in the tune, because there's a lot of people out there who are phenomenal producers and engineers and sound designers, but they can't write a good tune. It's like, yeah, it's really clever technically, but who's going to give a shit about that tune in 5 years? It's plink plonk music. Doesn't mean anything. There's no emotion in it, you know? And then you've got producers who are just amazing writers, and they're great at what they do. And then when they either work with someone else who can do the polish, or that, I'd much rather work with someone who has an amazing idea and isn't prolific in sound design. That's okay. We can always find someone to fix it, or we could do it ourselves. That's okay. But the idea is the gem, not, oh yeah, I'm using this plugin in this thing in this way, and this is how I'm doing it. And it took me, hours of doing. I'm just like, really, what? If you want to go into a complete musical wank, that's your call. I'd much rather actually make a tune that's really great and emotes to people. And the best tunes are the simplest ones in that way. They're not necessarily the simplest to make, but they've just got a great idea. And each sound has its own space to live in. And that's it. It's not filled with like stuff. You listen to a lot of music, people like Blade Runner, who I absolutely love, one of my favorite producers, and LSB and producers like that, their music sounds fairly simple, but a lot went into that to create those spaces so that each one of those sounds breathe. And that's really it. A lot of that is the mixing, the mastering, the widening, the splitting of frequencies. All of that stuff is what really makes it. So you could start off with a sound, and then you might think it's not very good, but by the time you finish putting your processes on it and splitting frequencies and EQing it, which is really, it's just constant chipping away at that clay. It doesn't have to be. I think people start out by looking for an amazing, complicated sound.
Yeah, like a big synth sound.
Now you kind of have to work to get that sound. But that's why I say, for me, start with a writing session. So I'll just get an analog bass out of something like analog in it doesn't matter, or just a sub bass, and I'll just play higher up on the keys and just write the bass notes out that are in my head for the melody that I've got there. So I'll start with like some strings, some chords. I generally like to start in F. And then basically I'll just write the bass line out, and then I'll just put just a rubbish sort of loop, even just to see how that feels. And I'll just let that cycle around, and I'll just see how it feels. And I might leave that alone for an hour or two, put a treatment on my hair, put face back on, music's still going, come back in an hour or two. And then what happens is I give it a break, don't listen to anything, do something completely different, come back, and it should hit me like a wet fish, like in the face, like a right slap, like immediately what's wrong, immediately if that melody's good, and then I'll take it to the next level.
Yeah. Again, so much to unpack, but a lot of stuff I really agree with, especially the sort of paradox of choice that people have nowadays in choosing VSTs and like marketed a new thing that's going to make this tune and make your music amazing.
That's the problem, isn't it? What it is, people are looking for something to do the work for them, and that's okay, but the joy you get when you actually start creating your own sounds from the ground up, and it really comes from you. You're not just surfing presets, and you're not just playing like other people's sample. The joy from that, I think that's a great place to start. Companies like Loop Masters, Loop Cloud, all that, it's all phenomenal. And I love that. I love that. I use Loop Cloud all the time. I think it's a great starting block to say, look, I just want to get a loop in and just get my ideas. That's great. But what will eventually happen is for you to really get your own unique sound that doesn't sound like anyone else. It's got to come from you and your own uniqueness, not someone else's sample.
Yeah, like record the sound of your radiator and then pitch it down, make a bass from it. I love using Foley samples, and I love like just hearing a sound somewhere at someone's house and going, can I record that next time I come here, and just take it home and see what happens. But yeah, I think you're right also about like we sort of have this idea that throwing a lot of stuff in the mix is like how to make it sound good. But if you look back at like acts like Yazoo in the 80s, or even drum and bass artists, like I'm not like super proficient at drum and bass. My knowledge of it's not great, but I do know Photek, and like the space that guy has in his track, it's just phenomenal. It's like a room to like look around in and feel like you're within an environment. I personally spent a lot of time throwing everything at the mix and wondering why it didn't work. And then suddenly these subtractive processes, like you were talking about earlier, like filtering things down, putting a bandpass filter and sitting the toms in this frequency range and rolling off the bass down here. Yeah, those subtractive things are really the way forward.
One of the things I like to do as well that I think will help a lot of people is I always have templates set up in my DAW. So one of the things I tell students who are new and are like, how do I nail the arrangement? Because you really cannot mess with the arrangement in dance music. There is a particular arrangement that works, and it works for a reason, right? You know, because DJs are mixing in and out of tracks. I produce all kinds of music. I produce, you know, many different genres, and so there's a bit more freedom with pop songs and a bit more freedom in the sense of, but drum and bass and, you know, dance music, house, techno, all of that stuff. So what I say to you, well, when you get your DAW, put your favorite track in that you know is a monster track and just set the locators under anything that happens that is important in that track. So for example, 33 bars, what happens there? There's a drop. 49 bars, what happens there? There's a drop. Or you could put a locator, here's where the ride comes in. Here's where, literally put as many locators as you want and then delete the track and save that as a template. Now you have a perfect arrangement that's always going to work for you. Secondly, it's good to have a track that is similar to what you're making in your DAW so you can A/B the tracks and check how, you know, the levels are sounding and all of that. I always start my tracks at -6 dB. So I've got plenty of headroom when it comes to mixing and mastering afterwards. So I start my tracks at quite a low volume. I don't mix blasting constantly. In fact, I think I hear better when things are quieter. And then when I turn them up, frequencies sort of stand out. But one, I want to save my ears. And two, you just want to be careful with loud. Sometimes everything can just sound deaf and then you miss frequencies. Quiet, a hi-hat will really stand out if it's too loud, or a vocal, whatever. And the other thing I like to do when I finished a track is go through a process called stemming, where obviously I'm going to bounce each individual track if I'm sending it off to be mastered or if I'm sending my stems off to work with somebody as a collab. And what I tend to do is take all the stems from the track, individually import them into a new page on my DAW. So I'll open a new session and I'll drag in, like, for example, all the drums, and I'll do it one by one. And I then find sometimes I'm like, I didn't need that. That stem's sort of not necessary. Get rid of it. So then I have a clean version of stems. And often I feel like, even because we're all guilty of putting too much in there. But what I do is basically shave it down once the track's done again and just make sure, do I really need every sound that's in there? Has that actor actually got a place in this play? You know, or is it just like, what's it actually doing? You know, so I really go through a process of like shaving down the tracks when I'm then bouncing down stems at the end as well.
Yeah, I think it's quite funny. I wrote down A/B in my notes then just before you said about A/B recording. So I am making notes while we're talking, by the way, just so I remember. Yeah, and I think a lot of people do say that mixing at really low levels, not only is it really good for your hearing, which is massively important, you know, it's like staring at the sun all day if you've got it really loud, but also, you can hear the fundamental elements. You can hear things that are too loud or overloading the mix.
So one of the headphones that I really recommend to people if they have the budget, it is expensive, it's about $1,000, but it will change your life when you're doing your own mixing, mastering, and those are the Focal headphones, and it's the Clear Professionals. They are absolutely the best headphone in the market for mixing and mastering. They're just, you can hear what needs widening, what frequencies need splitting. You know, if you're doing side splits with EQ, you can hear all of that stuff in these headphones. They're just phenomenal. So you don't really need to be blasting things out loudly. You can just, you know, save your ears and listen to things quietly, because the quieter you have the mix, the more things will stand out. Like I said, if hats are too loud or a vocal is too piercing. So yeah, quietly. And then loud when you really want to hear what it's like. I also use a sub pack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I love my sub pack. It's awesome. You know, enables me to feel like I'm in a Function One sound system on a plane or wherever I am. And it's fairly easy to carry, although I've been stopped at quite a few airports with people thinking it's a bomb on my back. But and I'm just convincing them, like, honestly, it's just for music. It's not a really funky cushion. But yeah, I find, you know, these days I pretty much make my music all in headphones and with the sub pack. So I don't, you know, I don't have to worry about neighbors. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's wonderful. But then when I want to blast it out, I blast it out.
The other one thing I want to mention about A being a track, which I just started messing around with, which I quite like when I'm comparing someone else's track to something that I'm trying to do, is to put a filter after their track and to just go through maybe a bandpass filter or a low pass or high pass and just see like where the energy lies in this established commercial track. So just like low pass, and then you can hear like the bass and the kick drum, and you can hear the energy in that part of the track. And then I do it in my track, and I'm like, oh wow, there's like really need to boost this section.
That's a great idea. I like that. That's really cool. Yeah, I use obviously analyzers a lot, and just, you know, they will help you visually. I mean, I'm more auditory. But I learned that I had to use analyzers, and it took me a long time before I started to do that. And that was a good way to sort of measure, you know, again, when you're A-Being, I'm talking about obviously like measure, you know, where the other peaks all sort of like basically even, you know, where's the lows happening, where's the highs, all this stuff, and making sure that the frequencies are sort of balanced and listening. But I like that idea. It's a really good one. I might have to try that.
I didn't imagine that you used Ableton for some reason. It's superb, isn't it? I use Ableton myself. I use it right now to record here.
I am a proper Bableton. I love it. Yes. I think, you know, I've been using it years and years now. And one of the things is that when I lived in LA, I've been back in England for a year, but I was living previously in LA for 20 years. And then in England before that again. But I, you know, was offered a job teaching at Dubspot, which had some of the best Ableton teachers in the world. You have Fabius Beck, John Margulies, who wrote the Ableton manual. And, you know, people like that were teaching there at Dubspot, and they trained me to teach Ableton. So I was under their wing for at least about a year and a half before I was able to teach my own classes and do that. And it was a terrific experience to be taught by them. And of course, I'm friendly with the whole Ableton posse. I love Ableton. They're great. You know, we always used to go out and hang out there as well. And, you know, I have a good relationship with the company Ableton, and we've worked together in many capacities. And the thing about Ableton, when I started to learn to use it, and I've been using Logic before, is just there's so much you can do that you can't, at that time, you can't do with other DAWs. Obviously, having the two views and being able to play live and DJ with it and do that. But the thing that I think, you know, people love so much when I teach Ableton to them is that within 3 hours, they're remixing their favorite track, and they can't believe how easy it is. You know, it's really unnecessary. There are some DAWs that I feel like Pro Tools that are just unnecessarily difficult. Like when I hang out with anyone in Pro Tools, I'm just going, oh, for God's sake, I'm growing gray hair here. Like, can we just move it along? Because it's like, and I know people are going to hate me for saying this because I've worked with people like Hans Zimmer and all these amazing composers, and I get why you have to use Pro Tools for, you know, 60-piece orchestra, and I understand. But it's like 20 moves for one. You know, it's like 5,000 buttons just to do one function. And,
exactly. I hear you on that completely. I felt very alienated using Pro Tools, and it's not welcoming.
It's not welcoming.
It's really hard to describe it.
That is I think you did a great job there. I mean, I think that's the biggest problem. It's not welcoming, and it's just confusing as fuck. And it's like, you know, whereas Ableton sort of makes sense, and it's not confusing, and it does everything, and it's brilliant. I still use Logic, however, for recording my vocals, because I do like the editing process that Logic has for editing vocals. I still think that Ableton could do that, and that would be it for me. It would be the perfect DAW.
Is that like a track, sort of a take shifting thing that it does? What is it that Logic does?
Basically, like with Logic, and the version I have super old, I should just say this. So if people are listening to this going, what is she talking about? I've had the same version of Logic for like probably 10 years, and I've never needed to change it because I don't use it I only use it for vocal editing and slicing. Plus, it's in a computer that has certain plugins that I've never updated that computer because it's got really old plugins that won't update and I don't want to lose them. And there's certain vocal processing that I do that is just mine alone, and that's it. You can't get those plugins again. So what it is, it's basically when you're doing the takes, it loops, right? So you've got one take and then you see another take underneath and it loops and it loops and it loops. But what I like is the tools, the scissor editing, so you can just basically phase out bits and then phase in other bits and just do that. And you can do that sort of in Ableton, but it's much quicker in Logic. So for me, it's just being able to take the marquee tool, fade out a piece of vocal I don't want, like a little bit, and I could just see it. And I'm so quick at putting vocal comps together now because of that. Whereas when I tried in Ableton, it just felt like it was a much longer process. That was the only thing. So the only thing I don't do is my vocals. I do those in Logic, and I do everything else in Ableton.
Right, yeah, because sometimes with Ableton you feel like if you're overdubbing or if you're recording another take, it feels like it's just taken away what you already did, and you have to sort of scroll back in time through it. I totally understand that. Also,
there's a slightly dirtier sound in Ableton when you're exporting stems. A lot of drum and bass heads prefer to use Logic or Bitly or something else, you know what I mean? Because it's like it's almost a little bit more digital. Now, this is where you get really nitpicky because the layman won't actually hear the difference. But sometimes I feel that that's just because people maybe have the wrong warp settings on their settings when they're exporting. And the bit depth is important, and making sure that it's not, because the way you export changes the sound. So it's quite interesting when I speak to people who are mixing and mastering, and they're like, oh, could you export this bit depth or that one and not do the one you're doing? And I'm like, why? And then they explain it to me, and I'm like, okay, all right, well, I can't hear the difference. And then afterwards I hear the difference, and I'm like, okay, well, you learn something every day. So mixing and mastering is a whole art in itself, and it's just one that I don't enjoy. I much rather, I'll be honest with you, I do not like to mix or master my own music. I'd much rather work with somebody to do that and give them the cash and say, I just want to write the tune, finish it, and then have somebody else mix and master it. But sometimes you just have to, because especially if it's a drum and bass track, the mixing and mastering kind of goes hand in hand with the sound design and the processing as you're making the tune. So sometimes I'll actually make a tune with some mastering plugins on at the same time, just to see how it sort of is sounding and shaping up without relying on them as a crutch, but like just seeing how it will sound and then removing them, and then just constantly, it's a constant thing. So part of finding the joy and bliss in the studio was saying to myself, what am I good at? What do I suck at? And not beating my head against a wall. If my talent lies in the writing and the producing of the track and not the mixing and the master of it, so be it. You can't try to be everything. Not to say you shouldn't strive to up your game, but at the same time, like for years and years, I just beat myself up because I wasn't great at mixing and mastering. And then I was like, well, I can't sing like Mariah Carey either. So should I beat myself up over that too? There's only a few artists. There's only a few artists in the world who can do it all. Prince having been one of them, and do you know what I'm saying? Not everyone can be Prince.
Absolutely.
But then I guess, I think we've all got strengths in lots of areas. We've all got weaknesses. But it's definitely true to recognize where they are and sort of reconcile those things with yourself, to be happy and content with your failings as well as your things that you can accomplish. I think that's really important. That's a nice, useful thing to do.
The reason I said that is because there's someone that, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's somebody that I worked with for quite a long time who's an amazingly gifted, just so gifted, it's ridiculous. But he's constantly, every other month, whining about giving up on music, not wanting to make it anymore. It's a waste of my time. It's blah, 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 to the point where now I can't bear to even have those conversations with him anymore, because I'm just like, look, stop focusing on what you don't have and focus on what you do have. So what if you can only make neuro and you can't make jump up, or you can't do this, but look what you can do. It's such a skill, but instead you're focusing on the have not rather than what I have. And I think, you know, as producers and artists, we can get a little bit caught up in our own drama. And it's very important to just say, look, I might not be the best singer in the world, but I have something to say when I sing, and my voice has got its own vibe. Celebrate that uniqueness. You don't have to be great. You just have to have something great to say. And that's the difference. You know, there are lots of singers who are famous and they don't have great voices, but what they're singing about is heartfelt. You know, their lyrics are heartfelt. What they're saying gets across, you know.
Definitely. And I think that's what connects with people. You know, that is what... I was reading something earlier that was written by a prolific manager. He's been a manager of lots of big DJs. And he was saying that... his name's Jake. I can't remember his surname off by heart, but he did help me out.
I wonder if I knew him, that's all.
You may well do. I think he was the manager for Mario Picotto and like some big sort of electro-y sort of type acts. But yeah, you know, he was saying that what you need, your audience want connection. They want that connection. They want an emotional connection with the music. And like, you don't build your fan base. They connect with you. They connect with what you're doing. So you can't just like, oh, I'm building a fan base now, or like, you know, I'm building success right here. No, you got to put out music that touches people.
It always starts with a song. People forget that. And I remember when I was signed to Sony back in the day, and, you know, I remember people telling me that. It's like, at the end of the day, when I'd be like, well, how does this record get so many radio plays? And how does this work? And how does this work? And blah, blah, blah. And I was just curious about everything. I was like a sponge. I wanted to know it. And, you know, my manager at the time was just like, it always starts with a great song, rap, you know, always starts with a great song. He goes, that you can polish a turd as much as you think you can, but it's still going to stink of shit, you know. An excuse to be sorry to be crude, but it is, you know, you it's just the same as someone gives you a crappy tune to mix and master. You can't, you're still mixing and mastering a crappy tune that's got distortion, or it's not bounced right, or there's all kinds of things wrong with it, or the arrangement's wrong, you know. So you've really got to get the basics and the fundamentals right, which means in pop, the story you're saying in a song, the lyric and the hook, that's it. In drum and bass, you know, it's the way that bass drops, but there still has to be some emotion there. Otherwise, what are we listening to, you know? So, you know, yeah, it's important.
I was listening to, I've been listening to a lot of drum and bass in the last few days just to sort of get me into the vibe, and I've been listening to your albums, and I was listening to John B Up All Night earlier on today, and that exact thing that you're saying sort of came to mind. Like, the lyrics are so simple in that track, but they're all so prominent and powerful. Like, hold me tight, don't ever let me go. Up all night, I'll die for you. Like, wow, like, there's not many lyrics, but all of them, they hit so hard, you know?
Yeah, it's true. He's another great producer, phenomenal, who manages to get everything encapsulated in one. You know, people like Metric as well, who I love, who are phenomenal producers, and get that melody in such a way. It's such a beautiful melodies, but it's still tough as nails. You know, it's just still when it drops, it's tough, but they've kept and retained the beauty in the track. I love that.
So in terms of like drum and bass, wow, it's such a huge subject matter. But you talked in your previous interview that you did with Raw about the diversity that was in the scene back in the day, and how everyone was very open with each other, black, white, you know, genders, everything. You know, you were just like one group. How's the diversity in drum and bass changed for you? Like,
it's for me, music has no color. It shouldn't be about it never was about that. I think predominantly, though, we all know you know, the roots of drum and bass and reggae and where it comes from, and then house music and all of this stuff. I don't really feel it's I think it seems, I don't know, you can get into a bit of like, I'm trying to think, have I even thought of that with the music? It's probably the first time I've even thought of that. I think it's more diverse now in the sense that it used to be very much roots and reggae orientated. And I think that has spread out a little bit more. I mean, definitely America got involved, and, you know, you've got Diesel Boy and different DJs and people and Canadians. And then you've got like, you know, the Asian influence with trap and all of that stuff, and dubstep sort of really took it off and turned drum and bass into a much more sort of commercial, different, that went, I mean, in Asia, dubstep was absolutely huge. So I think it's become more diverse. I think drum and bass in England is still retaining the same amount of diversity. I honestly don't think about it, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't think about who's making this tune, what color are they? Are they black, white, Asian, or whatever? I just think is the tune good, which is I think what it should be. But the music just moves so fast, doesn't it, in drum and bass? I mean, it just changes. So I think a lot of it for me is still the same players making the same music, and then all these new and exciting young producers that have come through who are amazing, and people like Dope Ammo and Exile and producers like that were just really, really good. I don't know. I don't really think about that, to be honest with you. I guess I've gone off rails with the question. Is the question, do I think it's diverse, or do I think it's not diverse enough?
Yeah, I don't know. Just like, how has it maybe changed? And I mean,
I think more rich white kids are definitely making it. I just got out of college and I've done a degree in sound design. Going to give it a go. It doesn't look very hard. Shop at Waitrose as well. No, I don't know. I'm just playing. I just think that I think we have to respect the culture and where this music comes from. And I think we mustn't forget that, because it's entwined in reggae, it's entwined in deep culture. And so for me, that music is where it comes from. I mean, that's why it's called drum and bass. I mean, it's where it comes from. So I think as long as we remember where it came from, and we don't ever forget the roots of where our cultures come from, I think that's fine. Anyone can make it, can't they? It's free.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going to some amazing drum and bass nights in my hometown, and it was exactly as you described in the previous interview, of just everyone coming together. Like when the bass drops, it's just everyone's this one sort of unifying force going to somewhere together. Like, you don't know where you're going, but everyone's going, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be exciting, and feeling that like electric atmosphere in a club.
I mean, at the end of the day, this has touched everybody. It doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, you did go to sound design school. I was only teasing earlier, but the point is like there are a lot of people are making music now. It's the job of music to bring people together. And one of the things I always say to my, female students is that, look, if you get obsessed by this, and like I was, you'll never, ever be lonely. It's the most amazing antidote to boredom, loss, heartbreak. You will never be bored, because anytime you're bored, just go to a studio, man, and just play with a plugin or something, and just see what happens. Something will happen. So it is really beautiful from that point of view, and it is an obsession. I mean, from my point of view, it's an obsession more than is normal, definitely, because I'm not interested in anything else. And if I was forced to not do music, as I said in Raw, I would rather die. So
yeah, you did say it saved your life.
Yeah, well, no, it still does. I don't want to do anything else. If this COVID continues and it's like adapt and train and like do something different, I'll be like, yeah, I think I'll adapt and go to heaven or hell, whichever one will accept me, because like I just don't want to do anything else. This is all I've done my whole life.
I love what you said, that you think that being a DJ is having a little bit of telepathy, like knowing what the crowd want. I think that's so true. Like it's quite hard to articulate that idea, but I think you put it really well, that you sort of need to be telepathic a little bit.
I think so. I wish you could have that in the studio as well. When you're making a track going, oh, I know what they need. This is it. It's not quite that simple, but you know what records in your box, if you're playing records or digitally or whatever you're doing. But the point is like, what to pull for and to draw, depending on the atmosphere that's in the room. And I think part of that is just years and years of experience of being in rooms and knowing how to read the crowd. So much so that, you know, I remember playing in crowds and being one of the first people to spot if there was ever a fight or something happening, because you just get this sense. You just get this sixth sense that's highly developed as a DJ, where you could be in a room and you just know what the atmosphere needs, and you know, but you also can sense if something off is happening. And often it'd be, you know, there was a time, I don't know if you're familiar, there was a time in the drum and bass scene where there were quite a few scraps going on, and there was a little bit of a, let's just say, a bit of a violent phase that happened.
I remember gun events with guns, and
so that was a long time ago. But the point
it was
is
a long time ago.
that you know, you would get used to DJing, and your hair on the back of your head would start to sort of prickle, and you'd be like, there's a fight somewhere. And you know, you'd look at the bouncers and point and be like, it'd be your job, because you could see everything. One, you're standing high on a podium or whatever. And two, it's just a sense of all is not well, you know, what's going on. But on the other side of that, to flip the coin, you know, you also know what people need. And when the atmosphere is electric, it's very easy to say, I know what to pull out, because just this will make people just lose their minds.
I think it's an incredible skill, and it's definitely something that's probably honed over a long time. Or maybe it's innate. Maybe you just grew up with the ability to know what music people want.
I think that for me, that ability actually wasn't, I think that was from my hotel life. When I think about it, when I was speaking at Raw about I sort of said it hasn't helped, but then I thought about that question after, and I thought, ever since I was a little girl, I was expected to go into, you know, this room or that room where my, you know, stepfather was, and he'd be having a meeting, and there was always high-powered people around, and so, you know, you're always walking into a room where people are watching you. And my mother was always like, you have to behave, because, you know, we run this place, this hotel, and you can't be running around and being crazy and all that. So I got very used to being, at a very early age, walking into a room and just saying, hello, how are you? My name's Sharissa, and shaking hands with all the adults. And I just got good at working the room from the age of like 6 upwards. And then I was playing my first piano concerts at 7 in the hotel lobbies with jazz players. Not lobbies, in the hotel dining room rather, with the jazz players who would play, because there'd be, you know, double bass, boom, 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 boom. And, you know, I'd be playing the piano and doing that stuff and accompanying them. So I just got used to rooms very, very early. And then when I signed my record deal with Sony, it was the same thing. It's like, okay, we're going to do meet and greets. And when I say we're going to do a few, it's like 6 weeks of meets. And, you know, you just got to get good at adapting and immediately reading, what does this person in front of me need from me? I think they're really looking for some reassurance, or they're looking to just say hi, or they you know, whatever. And you just get a sense of somebody. And also as an actor, there was a great thing that we did, where an experiment with Howard Fine, where he would say, okay, you walk into the room, you're going to grab a chair, and you're going to sit in the middle of the room, and you be quiet for 5 minutes, and everyone is going to write down what they think you're about.
Oh my God, that sounds like my worst nightmare.
From the way you're dressed, to the way you carry yourself, to the way you sit. Is your posture straight, you know? And, you know, everyone was after like 5 minutes. Well, she's either a rock and roll star, artist, or, because I had a belt that said sex on it and it was studded. I had a rock and roll Nirvana t-shirt on, and I was sort of sitting back and, you know, slouching a bit. And I was just like very, very like big smile on my face. And I just sat there looking at everyone. And they're like, she seems pretty open and very like personable and very, yeah, she's probably an artist, and, you know, she likes Nirvana. So she's obviously into rock, and it's, you don't know how much you're giving away just by breathing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you get good at reading people, which is why I love FBI serial killer profiling kind of stuff, because I'm like, I know, did it? I know, I got it.
Yeah, I think, there's the huge amount of stuff that's not being discussed, or is difficult to articulate about a certain person. Or like, I run quite a lot. I like running, and I can see someone jogging for like 2 or 3 seconds, and I can tell so much about like how far they are into their jog, how are they feeling, like what are they working up towards. You know, you can tell there's so many minute details that we sort of just absorb. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's why I think clairvoyants would probably make great DJs. Don't go see a clairvoyant. They're just really good at reading people. That's all it is. Unless there's a genuinely gifted one.
I'm sure there are. Maybe there are some genuinely.
No, I believe it. I believe there are. I do believe there
there
are some
okay.
genuine gifted people with different gifts than us. You know, the other senses that are more finely tuned. I mean, back in the day, and just is going so off topic, but back in the day, I mean, we were cavemen. We had to rely on our sixth sense if we were going to get hunted or eaten alive. So yeah, I believe that people have gifts, you know, that we might not have.
Definitely more in tune. I don't know whether. I'm not sure I don't know if this is appropriate, so you can avoid this one if you want. But you spoke a little bit about taking acid, and you mentioned that you had a near-death experience on it. And I think that there are schools of thought that say when people have near-death experiences, they get more in tune to like reality. Is that something that you found?
Yeah, they stop fucking around with drugs. Hopefully, a near-death experience is a sort of wake-up call, isn't it? It's like, you know, just pack it in. It's time to grow up. I was speaking to my friends about this last night, and I was saying to them, like, you know, it's been so long, so many years being sober. And when I say being sober, I never got help for being. It was never like that. I just decided to stop, and that was it. It was like, yeah, enough of this now. And, you know, it was fellow musicians like BT who would say to me, he goes, you know, if you're this good when you take drugs, imagine how good you'd be if you were actually present. He goes, your instrument, your body is your instrument. He goes, and when you're making music, your mind needs to be clear, and you have to just be clear to create, genuinely create. And it's like, you know, he was really right about that. Although I made so many good tunes when I was, so, you know, the day after. I mean, I'm sort of in two minds whether half of him's right and then half of me's right. But I think that ultimately, I don't have a death wish. I've made peace with my past, and I just want to live a good, healthy life, and I want to be able to do what I'm doing. And look, it's really simple. The come downs became too much for me to handle, and that's what stopped me. Otherwise, I'd still be doing it because I like doing all that stuff. It worked for me. I loved it, but they don't love me. The drugs don't like me. So it was a no-brainer. I had to stop because I can't spend 2 weeks after recovering and feeling suicidal and not wanting to live it's just no way to live. So I decided to clean up my act, you know, go through what I had to go through to do that, and never look back, really. And what's great is what I've encouraged a lot of friends to do the same, and watching them now take that journey is pretty awesome as well, because now I can go around their house and hang out with them without someone trying to shove a spoon of coke up my nose. But yeah,
well, that's snorting a line off the banister.
Because for a while there, I'd have to go party around people's houses, and I'd be the sober one, and they'd be like, "Well, there's a line there if you want it." I'd be like, "No, I'm good." But it was interesting watching people, especially if you put one of your own records on, and you're watching people reacting to your record when they're buzzed, and you hear all those percussive little sounds that you put in the tunes are the tunes that they're sort of making these weird like little dance movements to, and you're like, that's fascinating. Here I am watching them off their tits dancing to my tune whilst I'm sober. Never done that before. That's pretty cool. And they just got used to me being sober, and now a bunch of those friends are actually on the same path. And you know, you've got to find that when you're ready. When you're ready, you know, when you're ready and good and ready. But I know for a fact that for me, it was because I was still reconciling stuff. I was trying to not deal with stuff. When you are happy and balanced and you don't feel, and there's no need. You know, when you're happy, you've got your shit together, you know your purpose in life, you know what you're doing, you know why you've been put on this planet, you know how to give back, you've resolved those issues. And let's hope you do resolve them by the time you get to my age. Otherwise, you know, it must be awful to be trapped by the same problems you had in your 20s, to be trapped in those in your 40s, 30s, and 50s. You know, we have to take responsibility and accountability for ourselves and grow. You know, that's just the way forward, and hopefully come out better versions of ourselves. That's the whole point, isn't it? So yeah, whilst I look back fondly at those days and those years, I also say addio and thanks for the good memories, but at the same time, because I wouldn't change a thing, but at the same time, like, God, I could not live like that now.
No, yeah, well, first of all, like, that's sage advice from Mr. BT, who, I mean, that's clearly he's coming from a point of really caring about you and looking out for you. I think it's brilliant, and sometimes it's hard. I think if you have a friend who is into that and they do it on a regular basis, it's hard to be that friend that comes over and says, I love you, but I don't feel like this is good for you, and you need to maybe step away. It's really hard to come from that place because you know that you may well face what's the word? It's going to cause friction.
Well, I think the best way to handle that for me, what worked is if you're friends, if you're setting an example in the sense of someone can turn around and look and say, well, why is she always okay? Why does she feel happy? Why is it every time I see rap, she's doing so many things? Why is she always on fire? Why is she? And eventually, you want to, if you play tennis with good tennis players, as I've said in Raw, your game will be better.
Yeah.
So the best way is to set by example, to say, well, I'm full of energy, full of beans, I'm productive, I'm smashing it, I'm happy, and yeah, I'm living my best life.
Definitely. And
better to do that than turn around and say, look, I don't think this is good for you. What I've said to certain people is like, when you're ready, I've been where you are, and eventually this will get old and this will pass and you won't want to do this anymore, or not. But, ultimately, if you're wondering why you're not getting ahead, it could be, this is what's the sticking point. And when you surround yourself by people who are successful, who are doing well, and you watch what they do, I was very, very fortunate in my life that I know a lot of wealthy people. I know a lot of people who give back. I know a lot of people who are producers. I know a lot of people who are on the other spectrum of that. And the one thing I can say about all the people who are kicking ass in their life is they're not sitting there in a room smoking a million blunts. They're awake early. They're training. They're eating clean. They're giving back. They practice philanthropy. They do meditation. They do, and I wanted to surround myself with people who were like this from a very early age. And, I learned that the ego is the biggest problem that we have to deal with, and I learned when I was working with not only Hans Zimmer, but Mark Isham as well. Like when I was watching him, he invited me to Abbey Road Studios when he was doing, I think, Rules of Engagement and the London Philharmonic Orchestra and all this stuff. And I was like, I walked in there and, Jerry Bruckheimer was in the room. He was in the room. And Jerry Bruckheimer really knew his stuff, in the sense of like, he'd be like, I think we need to change that quarter note to a fifth and blah. And you'll be, and you're sitting there and they all speak very quietly to each other. No one, and Mark would go, yeah, I can do that, absolutely, and blah blah blah, absolutely. And I'm just sitting there thinking of all the people and all the ego I've had, and all the people in drum and bass, and how we get all bent out of shape. And I was like, yeah, I want to be like these guys. That's something to aspire to. I want to be like these guys. Talk quietly, articulately. I haven't mastered the talking quietly yet, but just get on with it. Just do the job. It's not, and there's no ego in that room. And if anyone deserves to have an ego, it's people like Jerry Bruckheimer and Mark Isham, because they're huge composers. There's a composer called Henry Jackman. He's wonderful. About 30 years ago, he booked me when he was in uni to play a jungle rave in his university. And then years later, we reconnected in LA. He'd come around my house and he'd play piano, and we'd be jamming on the piano together. And I'd be sitting there going, just no one would know the way you act. Like you're like one of the world's top movie producers in the world. And you're sitting here jamming on a piano with me, and we're about to go eat sushi, and we're just having a laugh about drum and bass music. It's mad. There's no need for all the, so what I guess I'm saying to round up is when you sort of have come to terms with yourself and you've made friends with your demons, and they can sit equally on your shoulder with your angels, I think you're in a good place. Do you know what I mean? There's no need for that ego. Healthy ego is good. It's good to know what you're worth, because otherwise you become, people can take advantage, and they mistake niceness for a weakness, and it's not, right? So I know my worth. I'm a hard businesswoman when it comes to negotiating my fees and things like that, or I absolutely know my value. I value music, but at the same time, like, we have to figure out how we can give back in this world, because if we just take from it all the time, in every sense, in nature, in music, in money, and whatever, and it's all about just me, it becomes really shallow. And you'll find that that mountain is a very lonely place when you sit on the top of it. Much more fun to fix your issues and use music as a therapy and come through the top, and then you'll suddenly find yourself surrounded by like-minded people, and it can be a really fun experience. Like the people that I surround myself with, that I work with, most of them, you know, honestly, they're just wonderful, and they're all like that. They're all calm and just really good at what they do and fun. And you know, it's like, I think when you're younger, you're sort of attracted to a different type of person, like these shiny, big, bright personalities who maybe are fake friends or you know, are really all about them, you know, but they've just got this charisma. So as you get older, it's quite nice. I think that's one of the nice things about getting older, is that you sort of look forward to this wisdom. And I'm like, God, I know I'm not old, but if I only had the wits that I have now when I was in my 30s, I'd have bloody destroyed it. You know, it's like, oh, I was so naive then. I didn't know anything. And it's funny, isn't it? It's a nice place to be. I'm in a nice space right now. I like it.
What would you say to your younger self when you were starting out, that you know now, that would help you through the years of DJing and production and vocals?
That's just simple. I would have said, save your money and invest it. The money side of things, you just think you're Peter Pan. You think you can live forever. You think all that money will just always roll in, because ever since I was young, I knew I was going to be an artist, and I knew I was going to do this. Ever since I could walk, I knew I was going to do this. And when I started to be successful, I had no doubt in my mind that that was the plan. You know, that's what I've been dreaming about, singing with a hairbrush my whole life. Like, I knew I was going to do this. And when I started to really get real success, and, you know, signed, you know, huge deals with Sony, and I was getting ridiculous money per show, I mean, I wasn't surprised. I was like, yep, that's right. This is how it's supposed to be. This is the plan. Work your ass off, work really hard. But I never had a doubt. It knocked me for six when things went wrong. I was so confused. I was just like, what? Hold on a minute. This isn't, what? No. What do you mean I'm not doing, what? I could not understand. I could not wrap my head around it, because I was so full of myself and what I thought I was. I'm Teflon, you know, and I just was infallible, and I'd never experienced failure. And it was just like everything I touched turned to gold, and then suddenly everything I touched turned to mold. It was ridiculous. I was just like, I lost all my money, I lost all my houses, I lost everything. And all right, look, it wasn't all my fault, you know what I mean? I had people swindle me and all that, I get that, but I still and I'm very grateful for the lesson, because the reason I'm in a good space now is because I learned humility. I learned that I'm not infallible. I learned to appreciate the talent that I have. I didn't take it for granted again. I learned to appreciate when anyone booked me. I learned, instead of expecting it and taking it all for granted, you know, I had to learn some hard lessons, man. And it was humiliating. It was embarrassing. It was, you know, I was on my knees, man, on my knees. And, you know, there's probably a lot of people out there who will be like, yeah, she was a bit of a nightmare to work with, but I always brought my A game, and I was a nightmare because they didn't work as hard as me. And so I expect people to work as hard as I do, and I don't like lazy people. What can I say? So, you know, if you were a lazy agent, yes, I probably wasn't your funnest client. If you'd rather do cocaine and invite and get the boys on gigs and go to strip clubs, then I'm going to give you shit about that. So, yeah, you know, it wasn't easy for me. It wasn't easy. And I was a bit of a, let's put it this way, I wasn't a meek lamb. So I've made my feelings clear, and it didn't really help me. But, you know, what can I say? Those people, yes, maybe I was a bit aggressive, but at the same time, I was the first female DJ out there doing this. And like, I had to fight for everything that I got, because there was a huge amount of sexism and favoritism, and, you know, it was difficult. So for me, I don't know. I don't know. It's just all about just calming down, getting to a good place, doing all this stuff. And I've gone totally off topic again, I know, but
no, not at all.
it's just difficult, isn't it? To just, I can't stick to simple answers, but the advice I would give is maybe just calm down a little bit, really think about what you're saying before you're going to say it. Ask yourself, is this really going to serve you? Is this going to get you the result you want? And save as much money as you can and put it into bricks and property. That'd be the advice I'd give myself. Everything else, it's fine. All the other mistakes I'm okay with.
That's brilliant. No, I think that was an incredible answer. You know, that you got the yin and yang of everything everything you touch turned from gold to mold. You know, that's almost a lesson in itself, isn't it? Yeah, because I think there are a lot of ways that people can get sort of caught up in the music industry, perhaps things that they're not sure of, going into like signing contracts. Do you have any like particular failures or like perceived failures at the time that ended up turning out to be sort of turning into a success later on?
I can tell you that there's 75 compilation albums I've never been paid for. I can tell you that I've signed record deals, which mean I've never been paid for records that were huge. I can tell you that some of my biggest records I've never been paid for. So I don't know if there's any stories where I signed a bad contract and it ended up good. No, there isn't.
Or like, well, I mean, those sorts of situations where that happened to you. Perhaps I didn't word the question correctly, but sort of like things that happened that were perceived failures at the time, but later down the line you sort of used that learning process in your career to enable that maybe not to happen.
I don't know if this is the sort of answer you're looking for, but there's been many times where I wondered if I made a mistake leaving England to pursue other musical avenues, because Henry Jackman always says I'm musically schizophrenic, and he goes, that's a good thing. You've got to stop thinking that's a bad thing. But I often wondered if it was a mistake. I didn't regret. I always felt good about my decisions, but there would be some times where I was like, oh, if I had just stuck here and done this, I would probably be this. But the experiences that I had making music with other producers in other genres and doing that was so amazing, and traveling the world and working with all these different people. But I still sometimes wondered about it. And then I came back to England and COVID happened and everybody lost their DJ gigs. And I was just, for the first time in my life, I was like, you made the right choice 100%, because you've got other avenues of income. You generate income in all these different worlds, and you don't have to rely on gigs. Whereas I've watched friends of mine just crumble because all they have is their gigs. And if I ever wasn't sure about the decisions I'd made, that was when I was really 100% like that little bit of wonder. I wonder if I should have. No, that went out the window. But I think that I don't look at things like that. I never really look at anything I'm doing as a failure or a thing that went wrong. I honestly look at it as a learning experience, if I'm honest. There's loads of things. I mean, God, millions of things. But no, I don't know, because I don't really know how to answer that question in the sense that anything. All I know is there's a load of things that went wrong and there's a load of things that went right. I'm trying to think of anything that I was like, did that work out in the end when I thought it wouldn't? Oh, God.
Well, for example, no, I think really the meaning behind it is like learning processes from a failure. Like if you did sign a contract and you ended up getting 0 royalties for it, like later down the line, 5 years later, you were able to negotiate a contract having had that experience in the past and not have that happen again.
Well, I'll tell you what, it didn't take me 5 years. From the moment you do something wrong, you learn from it, right? So yes, I learned the hard way, because back in the day when we were doing stuff, you know, I signed my contract, I believe with Paul Oakenfold for Perfecto. My first record was on the front of his car bonnet. We signed that one. I mean, you just don't know, do you? You know, you just don't know. We didn't have the internet then. You didn't have all the things that were obvious and helpful to us. So what I say to people, you know, when I teach a business course with music, obviously, and I'm like, make sure you have a writing agreement. Just last night I did this. I'm working with an artist. I won't say his name. He's a great artist, and we've started a relationship working together. And I said, let's put all of this down on email because that's legally binding. And here's going to be the rate that I'm going to pay you to do blah, 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 blah. Here are the publishing splits. Here's what we're going to do. Everything was done on email. And I said, all you've got to do is respond to me saying read and agreed. And that's it. That's good enough. And I won't work with anyone who refuses to sign a writer's agreement when we're doing a track together, or doesn't want to do anything. Oh, it's me, you could trust me. And I'm like, I love you, but no, this is not the friend business, it's the music business. So when you're ready to work with me, let me know. So no, I'm incredibly strict on things like that, and just making sure that there is absolute 100% transparency from the get-go. No misunderstandings. Here's how it works if we work a track together. Here's how it works if I give you a track just to mix and master. Here's how it works with publishing. Here's how it works with credits. Absolutely, right away. Let's just get that out of the way, the elephant in the room, and then we can enjoy ourselves. We both feel safe, comfy, and snug, and it's all good. And all that horrible part where we have to talk about money and stuff, which I don't mind at all, but let's just do that negotiation now and get it over and done with. It's really simple. People are afraid to talk about money because they're afraid they'll offend someone. I don't have that problem. Mm-hmm. It's like, look, it's just business, and because I've been surrounded by some of the best businessmen in the world, I watch how they do their stuff. I played for Richard Branson twice on Necker, and when he
on his magical island.
Yes, it is magical. There's unicorns now. But when he invites you there, he invites the top heads of ICM and Google or blah, blah, blah. And you'll be sitting there, whoever it is, and you just break bread and ideas are born, and I was invited there to entertain and play music. And because I was doing some really big things then, and, you watch how people negotiate, and there's no, oh, did I offend you? I'm sorry. Yeah, no, it should be 50 million. No, it should be, no, they just talk like normal. It's like, well, I would do that, but it's not really worth my time. How about we do this and blah, blah. And it's just a conversation. It's a conversation about money. And I think we have to start valuing music and money with that, because, if you equate your time and you say, all right, how many hours does it take to make a track? 48, 56 a month. All right. And then you're selling that track for $1.99. All right. If you think about what slave labor is, start thinking in those terms of your time. Because what's the one thing that you and a millionaire have in common?
We've both got limited time. Yeah.
None of you can fix that. Right. So I say to myself, what defines a successful human? And that is how I spend my time. So I can tell you, I'm one of the richest people in the world. Do you know why? Because I spend my day doing exactly what I want to do and living it in the way I want to do. I'm following my passion. I'm working. Doesn't mean I'm not working. Of course I'm working 15-hour days every day, but I'm doing what I want to do. So I own my time. It's my time, and that's it, and that's why when I'm spending time doing something, whether it's merchandise or whether it's, I think before I pay someone, is it worth paying them? Because how much time am I putting into this? That's the first thing I do, which is why I say no to a lot of projects, because people will be hitting me up and go, can you do this for film? We haven't got a budget yet. And I'm like, I would love to help you, but I cannot. My paid work takes priority. Unless it's something that I'm really going to be passionate about. You can't say yes to everything. You just can't, much as I'd love to help everybody out and every charity and everything that's going on, you've just got to do the best you can, right? So value your time is another piece of advice I would give musicians. Value your time, because those are your hard-earned skills.
Exactly. Yeah. That's superb advice, because, time is a finite thing, and, it's valuable.
Well, there's a lot of people ripping artists off. Okay, well, why don't you do this for me? This remix, this, and it's all free, and they're not giving them any publishing on anything that they're doing. They're not accounting to them. They're not promoting them really. And, it's like that does not happen on my label. It does not happen with me. I want to work with people for a long time. That's why I've been in the industry a long time. You want to build relationships, and your reputation at the end of the day is as Scarface says, he's got his word and his balls, and that's pretty much it, isn't it? Like if people know you're a bit shady, there's only so long before everybody finds out. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, the house of cards falls down.
People can say a lot about me, but they definitely will never say they've never been paid or treated fairly. They can't say that, you know. They might say she'd be heavy if you fuck around with her, but that's about it. You know, or she can be difficult if things aren't done a certain way, but that's because that's it. But treating someone fairly, treating artists fairly, all that stuff's important. Making sure your contracts are in place, understanding publishing, understanding sync, understanding everything. You know, just check out my course on Music Tech Collective. Just take a look. I mean, all that stuff is there. It's free. It costs nothing. It's like, you know, at the end of the day, I did that and put that together because I didn't want people to go through what I went through as an artist. You know, there's no need in this day and age for you to get ripped off, really. Although, funnily enough, you'll probably get ripped off more now because people expect everything for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What was that link then you said? Music Tech Collective?
So the link for the website is Music Tech Collective online. Think of it, and I just sent you a link. So if you could add that, that'd be great. And there's a course in there that says how to get into the music industry with no experience. And there are free trials on there, as well as the Ableton course, which was for Ableton 9 and then 10 as well. So basically, that it just tells you everything from. I can't share screens with you, can I? But I'll give you an example of the sort of things that's in there.
Yeah, sure.
You've got how to get started as a DJ producer, how to approach labels, dealing with agents, managers, protect yourself, writers' agreements, copyright, getting paid, what are mechanical royalties, what is publishing part 2, starting your own label, course notes, writers' agreements, copyright, course notes, what are mechanical royalties and all that stuff. So it just gets deeper and deeper into the real fundamentals of the music business, which is you have to arm yourself with knowledge. You have to. Because then when someone offers you a record deal and says, oh, I'd love to put your record out. Now, look, when you're a beginner, I get it. You've got to sort of take whatever you can. But you could start your own label. There's no need to get ripped off, you know. And the things you can ask when you get signed is like, well, when do I get accounted to? How does that happening? How's that happen? Is there a writer's agreement? Do you take 50% for the label share? How much of the master do I get? When do I get my masters back? Things like that, things that I never knew to ask, which have caused me lots of problems later in life with companies like Sony and stuff like that. So, I mean, you know, you want to make sure that you know that stuff. I didn't know that stuff. I had the biggest managers in the world and no one was looking out for me. There's only one person who's going to look out for you, and that's you. I'm not saying other people won't care, but I'm saying no one's going to care as much as you.
Exactly, yeah. I think on all those fine details, you know, like going through the contract with a fine tooth comb, you've got to be ready to... Because you're essentially signing your life away, especially if it's something like a 3-year deal or something like that. You have to be 100% sure this is right for you.
And make sure that word perpetuity isn't in anything.
Yeah. Delete that out of the entire
bloody word, man. That word has got me into trouble. If I knew what that meant I never even saw my contract. It was all lawyers. And I still got screwed. That's just the way it is. So know your stuff.
So you're running. You do teaching online. You mentioned that earlier. You teach Ableton. You also have a Patreon that you run as well. How does your Patreon work for you?
Well, my Patreon is pretty much a 24/7 job. I started a business in June and it's just taken off and it's gone mad. So like I said, it is 15 hours a day at least. The teaching I only take on every 3 months. I'll take on like maybe 5 students and that's it, because it's pretty much a 3-month course. And I'm got to be careful about who you're choosing and making sure that it's somebody who is in it for the long haul, really wants to learn. And so, you know, we go through a little bit of a process where I meet my students beforehand. And then if I get a sense that they're really going to commit to this, because I'm spending 4 hours a week with them. So for 3 months, you know, so it's quite a heavy thing. I only split that up into certain periods of the year. So I won't teach when festival season is on and things like that, obviously, because there's just very little time. So the teaching happens periodically through the year. Patreon came out of COVID. You know, I decided to set up a business where I could basically stream for my Patreons, do piano concerts, Zoom hangs with fans. It really just came from a place of, look, I really want to connect with people. I think community is the answer. The problem is, what's the antidote to what's going on right now? All this social distancing, all this not being able to hug each other, all this separation, all of this, the antidote for that is community. So I wanted to build a community online and a place where people could form a tribe and with the same love and like-mindedness of music, old school, new school, whatever. And the only rule is just nice people allowed. That's it, you know. So that's it. It's just the same sort of people. And it's true, you don't have to build your fan base. They do find you. And, you know, what I realized with Patreon is I streamed initially the first 13 weeks of lockdown. And I streamed relentlessly every week, a different genre, and, you know, just showed people what I was capable of, really, and gave them just some really great mixes on YouTube. So if you go to DJ Rap Official, you'll see the YouTube mixes. You know, after that, I was like, well, I want to continue doing this. What's the best way to do this? But I also don't just want to be tied to just, hold on. Something just came through my headphones. I also don't want to just be tied to DJing. I'll give you the link there so you've got it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So I wanted to create something that wasn't just about DJing. I didn't want to be tied to that. I wanted to really explore artistry and creativity as much as possible. And I thought, okay, well, here's an opportunity for me to do whatever I want to do. Like, if I want to do a piano concert, I can do that. If I want to speak to 1,000 fans, I can do that. If I want to just hang out and do a quiz, I can do that. If I want to show people a sneak peek at my production, I can just invite them into my world and they can watch me open the door, so to speak, DAW. But like, you know, I also thought, you know, I could do blogs, and I have a blog called Open the Door, and all these different things that I wanted to do. And I realized very quickly that, you know, streaming was just one part of it. And actually, the most important part is the creativity, being able to DJ whatever you want, being able to produce whatever you want, being able to connect to fans. And it's just spiraled now and really grown into this thing. And, you know, when I'm hanging out in the Facebook group, which is a private group for the patrons, I just they make me laugh. I've got 5 or 6 private chats now on my phone with different parts of the group members. And it's every morning there's just funny memes and funny stuff. And we all, you know, this morning I woke up and I went, morning ladies, to the boys. There's one group of 6 boys that I chat to who are particular trouble. And I'm like, morning ladies, how's the view this morning? Because it's like the view, they just sit there and they just chat about stuff. And we're going to turn that into a pod and based podcast, you know, where we talk about some certain things and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I've got all these different groups of people, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I am addicted to it. I wake up in the morning and I'm on here straight away, and I just love it. Every Monday they get the goodies. So they get, depending on what tier you're on, they get their goodies, their tracks, their concerts, their mixes, their video mixes, all their stuff. And yeah, it's wonderful. I just love it. It's I'll give you the link for that as well. It's an absolute,
yeah, sure.
It's just an absolute joy. I mean, you know, start taking that attention off yourself and giving it back. And speaking to people. When I first started this, honestly, I'll be honest with you, I thought this was going to be more a bit about, not me, but more about streaming and, you know, more about, and it ended up being the complete opposite. It ended up being about me communicating with people who are maybe having a hard day, me communicating with people who are having a tough week. Someone's gone for, you know, maybe someone's going through cancer, or someone's lost a parent, or someone's doing that. And I find myself spending time on the phone helping, and in turn feeling helped because of it. And it's just become this wonderful thing where I did worry if I was going to go to hell because I wasn't sure about what I was giving back to the world, if that makes sense. But now I feel rest assured that I've found something that I can do that is not only making me happy, but is really making other people happy. And that makes me happy. Ultimately, that's what's making me glow, I think. So
yeah, making a difference in their lives, I'm sure. Yeah, I mentioned to a couple of people that I was going to be interviewing you, and it was really like the amount of people that said, "Oh, I've been watching her sets online. They've been amazing." Like you've done you did a break set as well, didn't you?
Did a different genre for 13 weeks. It was fun.
Breaks is like my absolute favorite, and you played Scram by Plump DJs, which is like my favorite track ever.
That's actually my favorite mix out of all the mixes. The Breaks one's my favorite.
Me too. It was brilliant.
It's just got that energy. It's just like, and you could see I'm just having such a blast on it, and I just love it. It's all fun. I wish that Warner Brothers would unblock my classic Warehouse mix, but such is the thing with major record labels, and they are the devil at this point. They're just not helping artists and their music. I mean, there is a better way forward than what they're doing by just blocking your content. And look, I've got a legal license. I stream legally on my website. It's not hard, and I just think it's like cutting your nose off to spite yourself. Like, well, we'll just block this whole mix because one of our records is like, well, why don't you just approach the person and say, pay a fee for using this track?
Yeah, it's literally cutting off your nose to spite your face. Like, why just put a brick wall and stop it? If it's your product, like if it's their product, if it's their IP or whatever that's going out there, why are they stopping that getting heard? That's fucking counterproductive.
So I can play this. That's the biggest part of the joke. So it's like they don't even care, and it's just like I can't even play my own music on Sony live on Facebook or on YouTube. I can't play my own music.
Can you play it backwards? Will they still notice?
But then they'd find all the hidden messages I've put in there saying, fuck you, arseholes. No. Anyway.
That's brilliant. Well, yeah, I think it's fantastic that you're embracing the sort of modern take on it. And you've clearly got a huge fan base that really respects you and loves what you do. And you're giving back to so many people with your wonderful music. Just out of interest, do you know how many records you've got? You seem to have like an absolute ton of vinyl records. Do you know roughly how many you have?
Probably around, I've got rid of a lot of them. I got rid of a lot of my duplicates. I would buy 3 of every record.
Wow.
So now I've probably got about 5,000 records.
Cool. Are they categorized? Like they are, yeah.
Oh yeah. That's the first thing I did when I came to England and I moved into this house. I spent, in fact, there's a post where I put my camera on time lapse and I just left it running and I was cataloging every record, pulling it out of the sleeve. Okay, this is the techno shelf. This is the, jungle shelves. These are the happy hardcore shelves. These are the, and you just see me pulling every record out of the sleeve, playing it, putting it back. And it took 2 months.
That is brilliant. I secretly love doing that stuff. I love
doing you come around and do mine anytime. Feel free to catalogue them for Discogs. But they're not catalogued to that point. They're just catalogued in genre, and year as well. So I know where to go if I want stuff from 88 to 89 and up 91. So I know they're catalogued in that sense. But I would love dearly to have each record photographed, catalogued and put up on disc. Oh, that'd be amazing. But yeah, who's going to do that, right? But at the end of the day, the funny thing is that I catalogued everything, and the very next week, COVID happened. So I was there were no coincidences. I was just like, oh my gosh, could I ever be more in the right space at the right time? I'm ready to stream. I'm ready to play records. I'm ready to rock. I'd literally just moved into this place, finally got the record studio set up, and then that happened. And I was like, oh yes. Not yes to COVID, but yes, that for the first time, for once, I've got something right. I'm not.
Oh, you've got tons right.
No, I'll tell you what I mean. The amount of times I've had people say to me, if you had done Learning Curve 10 years later, because it was too ahead, and now everybody accepts that you can do this synthesis with genres and all this stuff. The amount of times someone has said, oh, if you'd made that record now, it would be huge. And so for the first time, I was like, the stars are aligned. I'm where I'm meant to be. Everything is in the right place at the right time. So yeah, that's what I meant by that. Not like, it was quite funny, really. It's nice when things happen, when serendipity happens, and it's good.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think sometimes you can have a decision and we can all have decisions and we're not quite sure whether it's right. And then sort of the universe just indicates that you were right, and that's really reaffirming, like reassuring. And you're like, yeah, I knew that was a good call. I don't know why I knew that was going to be a good call. So yeah, I'm really pleased that stuff happened, Yeah, in any other year, there's no way that would have occurred, but it was.
That's what I'm saying. It's very, very weird, and that would never have happened any other time. So there are blessings, and whilst it's been hard, and it is hard, and there's so many things that just don't make sense, and I won't get into that. But the point is, it's like I try to find the silver lining and say, this is what I'm gonna do with this, my time, because I'm never gonna get this time again. I'm never gonna be this age again. I'm never gonna be this day again. I'm never gonna have this time again. So what can I do with it that will help me when this is all over? How can I water that plant now, so that it bears some fruit? Really, that's the important thing, isn't it? Not sitting there going, I'm bored. How can anybody be bored?
I know.
Learn a language, do something. Like, I just don't understand when I meet people and say, I'm so bored, aren't you bored? I'm like, not really. In fact, I could do with a few more hours. I could do a 36-hour day, actually.
Yeah, I'd like to be bored. I would like that feeling.
Tell me about it.
Cool. Is there, on just one final thing, is there like a mantra? Is there any sort of mantra that you live by, or any sort of philosophy?
There is. Victory is for those who believe in it and believe in it long enough. That is my mantra. That and Sparta. This is Sparta. Yeah, no, I definitely think that that's it. That's it. I just do or die trying. I don't know. It's all the same thing. They're all the same. Better to be a tiger than a sheep. All that stuff. That's the swords that I live by, and they'll probably cut my head off at some point. But better to be a tiger for a year. Better to be a tiger for a year than a lamb for 7. That's what I say. So yeah, what way to go? But yeah. Good last question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for speaking to me. It's been really, really good.
It's been a lot of fun. We've been doing this for an hour and a half.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I know I can talk a lot.
You can, but it's wonderful to hear you. Thank you so much. Yeah, keep doing what you do, and I'll put all the links and everything so everyone can connect with you online.
I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Well, what a good chat we had the other night. As you probably heard, that was done over the internet, the first one done over the internet. But yeah, really amazing to speak to her. She had some really great insights about production, and there was other podcasts that discussed all of the sort of scandalous 90s behaviour. So if you want to know more about that, I'm sure you can go and check them out. Please do check out the GoFundMe campaign and support it if you want to. Okay, next month we have an absolutely huge guest, and yeah, it's going to be a really, really interesting chat with him. Thank you very much for listening. I'm midierror, and I'll see you again soon.